All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donovan Moxie. I am president of Mobile Assist, which is a new mobile app company that just got launched about a year ago here in the Bahamas. I also am chairman of the government's Tech Hub Committee for Grand Bahama in the Bahamas, and so some of the elements that I talk about here will actually cover some of the things that we're working on as well. So my topic here is what are the critical elements that are needed in order to establish a sustainable innovation commercial cluster? And that's a lot of things to say. You want to establish a technology hub within a particular region. And so with that being said, the first thing is, what is a innovation commercial cluster, or a technology cluster? And essentially, it is a geographic concentration of interconnected companies, entities, and resources that focus on commercializing innovative technologies. And these technologies or companies actually have a global reach or a global focus. And so you're essentially creating tech hubs around biotechnology. You may create tech hubs around blockchain type technologies. You may create tech hubs around internet and mobile technologies. And so those are the things that you're looking at doing from that perspective. So the question now is that let's look at further defining what these entities or these pieces are. The companies are really the entrepreneurs. And these are the entrepreneurs that start out these businesses. A business has to start from somewhere. We call it a startup, and it's in various phases. So you've got what we call seed stage companies, and these are pre-funded companies, pre-funded companies that have ideas or prototypes that they want to get started. They're early stage companies. These are companies that have some initial funding, developing their product, and might have early revenues. Growth stage and mature stage companies, which become profitable. They diversify their business, looking to grow globally. But the most important thing here is that the start of this cluster begins with the entrepreneur. They're the ones who come up with the innovative ideas. The other question is, what are the entities that actually now support this cluster? And there's several. There are government agencies which provide regulatory and legislative frameworks, if you will, as well, to govern how business is done, how innovation is done. There are universities, and these are research and academic universities. And this is where a lot of the new technology is actually created and developed. When you talk about things that spin out of a Stanford or spin out of MIT, they typically would start in a university lab, if you will, as well. What did I do here? Then there are research institutions. It's missing on the other side. I'm not sure what happened there. Then there's research institutions that are there as well. So in places like North Carolina, you have places like Research Triangle Institute. You have the National Institute for Health. These are government agencies that typically do first level research or applied research, where technology and innovation actually comes from as well. The other thing you also have is resources or support services for entrepreneurs in these regions. And so typically the most important resource here is really the human capital. And so this is really the entrepreneurs, and this is an educated and motivated workforce. If you're going to grow a technology company, it starts with also being able to access persons who have technical training, technical knowledge, expertise that you can pull from so that you can then grow your employee base. So those persons need to be available to you. The other thing that's important are really the investors. And these are the persons that actually put the money up, take the risk in order for you to grow your company. And the first set of investors you run into are really your angels or angel groups or your friends and family or your own money. Then you have next to them the venture capitalists, and these are the individuals that actually put in that growth capital, that expansion capital. And then you have the public markets. So when people go public or they issue an initial public offering on IPO, that's what you have available to you as well as part of the ecosystem. The other thing that's also important to a cluster are the professional and the community support services. So you're going to need legal services, accounting services. You're going to need entrepreneurial support services. And this is just not any law firm or any accounting firm. There are these services providers that actually focus on startups. They focus on technology startups. And so they have the expertise that you need in order to support the growth of the cluster, if you will, as well. Okay. Turn that one off. Both of them are off now. Here you go. Apologize. Yeah, it's still off. It's fine. Good. All right, we'll keep going here on this one here as well. The other thing, when you look at a software cluster defined, what kinds of companies are in those clusters? So you've got software development companies that focus on internet, mobile, enterprise, blockchain, cryptocurrency kind of solutions. You also can have biotechnology. And these are your pharmaceutical companies who do drug development. These are your medical device companies. And so you have little clusters that end up forming based on the expertise that are in that particular area. The other kind of cluster you can create is a cluster around advanced manufacturing. And these are clusters that actually produce computer hardware and devices and chipsets and robotics and auto parts and tools and machines. These are clusters where you do advanced processing for agriculture, for food. So these are other clusters that can be formed as well. Now the question is, how do these clusters all work together? What are those elements you need in order to build everything together? The first thing you have to start with is the innovation piece. Where did new technologies get created? When you look at a model that the US has and why the US is so successful, is that they take, I think, between 3 and 5% of the federal budget, all gets invested into grants. So you have the SBIR, STTR grants. So there's literally billions of dollars that the US invests that come from taxpayers into initial basic research and applied research. And so a lot of the technology then gets developed in university labs, or there are government labs where technology is being developed. There's also commercial labs, and then there's basically the good old-fashioned garage. We all know the stories about how the guys from Microsoft and HP built their first computer in the garage. Well, that still happens here today. Nowadays is really a nice computer over the internet, writing some software, writing some code. So the innovation happens here with the entrepreneur. Everything starts with the entrepreneur or somebody who's entrepreneurially minded. The other thing that happens now is that that particular venture needs to be funded. An entrepreneur can come up with a great idea, they can produce good prototypes, but if that's not funded, they're not going to go anywhere. So it starts now with that investor community. So within your cluster, you have to have people who now will fund you seed stage-wise. So are there friends and family? Are there government grants that go ahead and do this? This is one of the reasons why most of the technology companies in the US, their initial funding is through an SBIR or STTR. And you have multiple phases that they go through. Because again, the government is supporting innovation. And once you develop your prototype and you want to move forward and maybe productize what you have commercially, then you go and you now become an early stage company. So now you have to find angels and venture capital investors. So that cluster community must also have these kinds of investors that are willing to take the risk as part of the cluster. Then you become a growth stage company, again, VC funds as well. And if you're now mature and you really want to grow and expand, you can also do an IPO. This is the point in time where that initial investor and all the investors prior to them actually get the ability to cash out or exit out of the deal. Again, your cluster, your environment needs to be able to support those kinds of activities, if you will, as well. So here's what you have here. The entrepreneurs have to build and grow their companies. They basically need human resources, cash, professional services. The investors and entrepreneurs, they then get their exit through a merger, acquisition, or initial public offering. And then that new company are then started by the serial entrepreneurs or in reinvestment of the profits by the venture capitalists. That's the cycle. That's the cycle you go through. You have an environment that actually supports that particular cycle and moving forward as well. Now the question is, let's talk about some of these noted technology clusters around the world. So we have Silicon Valley, we have Austin, Texas, Boston, Massachusetts, Regional Triangle Park. And all of these regions have basically the same kind of ingredients. They have a great university that provides research, technology, innovation. In the case of Silicon Valley, you've got Stanford, Cal, Berkeley, and also, too, they have VC firms out there that literally have millions of dollars to invest in new technology. Very important part of the cluster. And from that, you then produce some of the companies that a lot of us know about that came out of the region, in the area. In 2016 and 2015, there was a combined almost $60 billion invested in technology companies. And so you have some of the companies actually that come out of that area all came through this process, that cluster environment, if you will, as well. Same thing here also for Austin, Texas. Again, the key university down there is UT Austin. And from there, you have the venture capital funds. And again, this does not even include the angel investors and the individual investors as well. And based on their capital, you then have these companies that were started or exist within that environment, if you will, as well. And again, you've got Boston, you have MIT and Harvard, and Boston University, that's in those regions. You have the venture capital firms. And you have the key companies that came out of those areas as well. The area that is near and dear to me is Research Triangle Park. This is where I went to school at NC State, here in RTP. So you've got UNC Chapel Hill, NC State, and Duke University. I spun my first company out of NC State. Raised capital from venture capitalists in North Carolina, on the West Coast, and in Atlanta. And these are some of the key companies that actually came out of, these are some of the venture capital firms. And then there's a number of companies actually that came out of the VC community and actually also sourced a number of individuals from the university environment. Like Red Hat, I was around when those guys got started, if you will, back in the late 90s, coming out of RTP. So the question is, we've got an understanding of what the ingredients are in order to form a cluster. So what do we do here in the Bahamas? What are those ingredients that are important to us? The first thing is, we've got Freeport Grand Bahama, which has technology infrastructure in place already. When it comes to broadband access, when it comes to what we have from a telecommunications perspective globally, we have everything in place. Grand Bahama is a city, or Freeport rather, is a city that was designed for over 250,000 people. You have less than 50,000. You have room for expansion and growth within there. And then more importantly too as well, talking about what the ingredient we have, is the University of the Bahamas Northern Campus. So this is fertile ground for us to begin to move things forward. So the question is, what does the Bahamas need to do in order to bring this cluster forward? The very first thing is, you want to recruit technology companies into the region. We don't have the technical capacity, we don't have the human capacity yet to kind of grow this on our own. So recruit those companies into the Bahamas. And then you have structured relocation programs to allow them to do that. Then what you want to do is make sure you promote, again, the government has done a great job in the Commercial Enterprises Bill, you promote those opportunities for these kind of technologies that are hot now. Blockchain, cryptocurrency, fintech, internet applications, biotechnology, robotics, artificial intelligence, all those things can be done here as well. The other thing that's important also is providing knowledge transfer and internships from those companies to the locals. Because when you talk about developing a knowledge economy, knowledge transfer is extremely important. Training is important as well. Now, when you look at this too, what role does the university play? We talked about this earlier, where universities play an important role in establishing clusters. So some of the things that the university can look at is making this northern campus really the engineering hub for University of the Bahamas. So you can form a college of engineering here in Grand Bahama that provides all the engineering disciplines that we need. The other thing you can do is recruit faculty to want to do applied research as well as teach. If you're talking about a university that's going to produce next generation innovation, it just can't be teaching the fundamentals in the classroom. Those professors need to also lead research and applied research with the intention that you want to commercialize what you created. Third is that you want to establish collaborative research universities with US and Canadian universities. So there's no reason why the UB campus that's focused on engineering and sciences can't partner with other campuses or other universities all over the world and have that research done here in the IPW here as well. Establish incubator and accelerator programs and create professional development programs that focus on technology skills development. Because if you build this kind of cluster, the initial workers will be foreigners for the most part. But you or we have to go ahead and figure out how do we develop our own human workforce, if you will, as well. The other thing on the capital side of it is we need to encourage venture capital investment at all levels. There's no reason why we shouldn't structure our laws and our policies where VC firms can come here to the Bahamas and actually have Bahamian limited partners so that they can co-invest in these new technology companies. You need to allow for that. Then there's no reason why the BISICs can't be adapted as a place or a platform for these initial public offerings as well, just like others have around the world. The other thing we have to look at here is the human resources. So again, we recruit enough people or companies here. We now can create critical mass within Grand Bahama. And then after doing that, that serves as the springboard in which we build these technology clusters. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
My name is Darren Cooper, and I am the owner and operator of Dee's Car Rental. Dr. Moxie, you could have had some of my time if you wanted to continue. I would have been happy to sit. But today I have been asked by the University of the Bahamas to speak on behalf of the Small Business Association. However, I do not speak today on behalf of the Small Business Association, but take the opportunity to express some of the concerns and issues that we as small businesses are faced on Grand Bahama. Today I will speak from a topic, taking a proactive approach to support current small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs. As most of you are aware, Grand Bahama for several years had been faced with a decline in growth in its economy, and the survival of SMEs have struggled to stay afloat in this economy. Firstly, we must recognize the importance of SMEs in our economy. The reality of it is we are job creators. Local businesses invest in its community and meet the particular needs and demands and provide alternatives for consumers. Competition between SMEs leads to better pricing. The more we shop at home, the more we strengthen our local economy. The more consumers, sorry, I'm very nervous and so I'm trying to get myself together. This is, Bridget, new for me. The more we shop at home, the more we strengthen our local economy. The more consumers patronize local businesses, the more businesses can give back to its community. Local businesses over the years have adapted to various of changes, and some of them are long-standing business owners within our community. SMEs have been faced with several challenges over the years, just to name a few. Accessing finance to develop and to grow their business. Financial institutions are less likely to lend to SMEs, as we are oftentimes perceived as risky than the evidence show us to be. Bahamas customs fees, duty and tariffs on goods, duty, tariffs and goods can always be adjusted and have been a few times. However, fees attached to the clearing and processing of goods adds even more to the final pricing of products. Operational costs. Some of these costs cannot be avoided. However, these add, whether daily, monthly, or yearly, to operation of a business, such as salary, power bill, private health insurance, which is an option, NIB. For limited companies, annual good standing and return certificate that's required to have yearly. The relocation, of consumers. Many persons have relocated because of job availability on the island. Business license fees that increase every 3 years based on the cost of living index. Black market operators, ladies and gentlemen, black market operators. We must crack down on persons who continue to operate business illegally. The car rental business, for which I'm a part of, have loads of individuals renting vehicles with blue plate license on them, which is very, very risky. Small businesses are very important to the growth and development of our economy. The level of government's interest in entrepreneurship for small business development has increased. I must say, actions have been taken by the government of the Bahamas and the Grand Bahama Port Authority in several ways to ensure that our SMEs on Grand Bahama, and by extension the Bahamas, continues to thrive within our community. In recognizing some of the ways that the government of the Bahamas has supported our SMEs, they have implemented or in the process of implementing the Small Business Development Center of the Bahamas. The government of the Bahamas announced in January of this year its license fee waiver for 1 year for businesses that's under $100,000. The government has also announced this year in January an investment of $25 million over a 5-year period to invest in SMEs on Grand Bahama. Another initiative of the government, the Grand Bahama Micro Small Business Economic Empowerment Initiative, which entails a mandatory 2 weeks readiness training, a pitch of a business idea for a grant of $5,000, which is a part of the $25 million that the government has allocated. The Bahamas Development Bank assists businesses with providing funding for the following areas: agriculture, fisheries, manufacturing, service, and transportation. In recognizing some of the ways that the Grand Bahama Port Authority has supported our SMEs, the Invest Grand Bahama Small Business Bureau has supported our SMEs. They have implemented several initiatives, and some of which are ongoing. The Capital Arena, the business license fee waiver program, which is for the downtown area and was also done in the International Bazaar. The Buy Locally, Shop at Home initiative. Ongoing training, customer service workshop, GBPA contractors workshop, VAT training initiative, shared space initiative, virtual office space initiative for photographers and videographers for those who do not need an office space to work from. In recognizing some of the initiatives of both the government of the Bahamas and the Grand Bahama Port Authority, we must continue to think of ways to take a proactive approach in supporting our SMEs on Grand Bahama. A few suggestions, if I may, from the SMEs. Each business owner has to see what works for him or himself, himself or herself in businesses. Find ways for banks and businesses who have more than proven themselves to provide funding to strengthen their business. We suggest the consideration of lowered customs duty and exemption on fees to business owners who are currently operating according to standard. Reduce license fees or discount on license fees for current licensee holders of the GBPA. If it's not possible, refrain from the increase of fees based on the cost of living index. Regulate markets such as the rental company, where the market is now saturated. We must enforce the laws regarding illegal operators in the industry. We also want to take this opportunity to thank the government of the Bahamas and the Grand Bahama Port Authority for supporting our SMEs throughout Grand Bahama. But we must sit to the table and discuss ways that we can continue to strengthen and to grow our economy, especially in the SMEs. A quarterly meeting is also suggested that business owners can sit together and have constructive conversations so that we will be able to grow this economy. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank you for this opportunity. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor at the University of the Bahamas in the Faculty of Pure and Applied Sciences, the School of Mathematics, Physics, and Technology. And as you can see, I have a PhD in mechanical engineering from McGill University and a Master's of Science from Florida Institute of Technology in civil engineering. My specialty in mechanical engineering is structural fluid dynamics with broad applications, one being the vibration of nuclear fuel rods in nuclear reactors. And in civil engineering, it's a host of things like water resources, highway design, construction management, etc. But as you can also see from the title, I'm not going to talk about any of that today. It's on taxation. And I started studying taxes and the methods of taxation back in around 2001. I think it was 2002. And I presented a couple of papers, a few papers in that area at Forum 2003, and another one in the following year in the COB US Embassy Forum on tax initiatives, and then another paper in 2007, which was published as a chapter in a book in 2009. So I've been refining this theory on taxation and studying economics in general long before I started taxation. So I'm just focusing on taxation today. Okay, here's the outline of my presentation. Introduction, what's wrong with import duties, VAT in the Bahamas, advantages of VAT, and a new kind of VAT, enterprise VAT, and how to determine the VAT liability, and then some important questions and issues concerning the VAT, and I'll draw my conclusions. What's wrong with an import duty tax system, which is, by the way, what you know we have as our main source of government revenue for a long time, and slowly changing to a VAT system. But it is known as one of the least effective of the major taxes as a significant source of government revenue for a number of reasons. One, it imposes no direct tax on the services industry, and this produces distortion and causes the poor to carry a disproportionate share of the tax burden. Tax revenues are down from the maximum potential by about 20%, according to my calculation. Secondly, as the small business representative just finished explaining, it presents an upfront cost to businesses, especially importing businesses, and a significant fraction of the economy, our economy, depends on imports. And this significantly challenges the success of these small businesses. Less competition as a result means higher prices. Thirdly, it's a tax on expenditure, and in this way, you can avoid it by not spending, as opposed to income tax. No matter what you spend, the government still gets a portion out of your income. Another way is to transfer the spending to jurisdictions which have lower costs and lower taxes. Well, on January the 15th, 2015, the government introduced value-added tax. It was a partial implementation. The tax rate, the exclusive tax rate is only 7.5%, which is equivalent to an inclusive rate of 6.977%. It's partial, meaning that a normal value-added tax would see around 20% for the exclusive and 25% for the inclusive, the other way around, 20% for the inclusive and 25% for the exclusive. That is the beginning. So what are the advantages of VAT? I think I skipped the page. First of all, it's a broad-based tax, and it taxes all economic sectors. As I said earlier, import duty does not tax the services sector. This taxes all, therefore it's not distortional, and in that way it's not regressive. And because it taxes all economic sectors, we expect an increase in tax revenue in general by at least 22%, according to my calculations. Now, my calculations are not necessarily here, and in a short space of time, I would not be able to explain everything. So I should have mentioned on the first slide, I have a website there where you can go to and get read more information, and you can download the full paper that I'm presenting to you today. The VAT is a fair tax. No upfront cost to businesses, in your area as well, no upfront cost. Therefore, you will have greater competition in the end. Prices will be lower, business costs will be lower, consumer costs will be lower. We'll get larger quantities as a result, and better quality as in consequence. And the greater amounts of income to the business will alleviate the understaffing issues that they experience. It's also a comprehensive tax. It taxes every dollar as it circulates through the economy. What circulation means is that money comes from the firms, it goes to employees, into households, some goes to the government, and then it goes from the households back to firms when they buy more stuff, and from the government back to firms. That's a circulation. You only need to tax the dollar once every time it circulates like that. And this is what a comprehensive tax does. If it's comprehensive, then there's no need for any other tax to get that dollar in the circulation. Some more advantages. It's a simple and effective tax, about as simple as the import duty system, where the customs officer just stands there, searches for what you have, or asks you what you have, calculate a percentage, and that's your tax. VAT does the same thing, essentially. It can be considered a tax on income, which I'll explain later. Therefore, there's no effect of reducing your expenditure or trying to save by transferring your expenditure to another jurisdiction. And it can be made similar to corporate income tax, which I'll explain later, and also progressive. And that'll come later as well. So as a result of all of this, the economy will be stronger, and there'll be no more need for de facto preferential tax treatment of foreign businesses, which we are so accustomed to. And they keep saying that everybody is treated the same, whether you're foreign or local. That may be so de jure, but de facto is a different thing, if you know what I mean. It might be written, the policies might be written, but what happens in reality is we rely on these foreign direct investments. Particularly in Grand Bahama, where we have so many industries and so on. The dissolution of import tariffs is compliant with the accession to the WTO, and therefore we'll have a better alignment with the international community. Value-added tax comes in many different types. There's the product type, the income type, and the consumption type. I have a new type here that I designed myself called the enterprise VAT. What is enterprise VAT? As I said earlier, VAT can be made similar to corporate income tax. Well, enterprise VAT is an expansion of corporate income tax. It's a tax on the taxable business value-added income. Like corporate income tax, it taxes business value-added income before it is distributed outwards to employees and shareholders, etc. There are fewer businesses in the economy than individuals, and so it will make it less tedious than personal income tax, which follows every individual, every working individual. It is more comprehensive than corporate income tax. As I said, they're similar. This is more comprehensive because it taxes every dollar that circulates through the economy. Corporate income tax only taxes that portion that circulates through shareholders and proprietors and so on. That's corporate income tax. It is more, I said that, it is a very efficient tax that can be made progressive. And if it satisfies all of those qualities, then it's the only broad-based tax you need. And all of the other nuisance taxes can be avoided or done away with. How do you calculate the liability in enterprise VAT? You might think it's complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. You find the taxable business income, and all businesses have accounts. They have accounts of income and expenses. So you can always find what your income is. And from that income, you get the portion that's taxable. And then you look at the expenses, and you get the portion that's called, the economists call intermediate business costs, ICM in this slide there. And you subtract that from the taxable income that you got in the first step, and that gives you the equation taxable income equals total sales minus your intermediate costs. The tax liability is then your tax rate epsilon times the taxable income. You can't get more simple than that. And of course not. And what's even better is that all of these quantities, TSM, ICM, because those are the two parameters you need to calculate TIM, they come right out of the business accounts. There's no new thing that you have to do. It exists today. You don't have to change anything except how you interpret those accounts. Interpret them in terms of TSM and ICM, and you get your tax. That's how simple it is. And as I said earlier, I don't have time to explain everything, so there's my website. I'll show it again later on, but if you want to read further, and I would recommend, if you're interested in finding out how all this works, I give a little more details in that paper. Of course, with any tax system, there'll be questions and issues. And with this kind of tax, there's some important ones: export and imports. How do you handle exports and imports? When you have a domestic firm which operates only in the domestic economy, that's no problem. The tax goes to the domestic government. But for transnational firms, who gets the tax? The importing country or the exporting country? Right now, with the VAT that we have, if you all are familiar with it, there's there's products that are exempted, and there are products that have zero rating, meaning you have no tax on those products. You can't claim if it's exempted, you can charge output. You cannot charge output VAT, and you cannot claim input VAT. If it's zero, there's no output, and there are no input taxes as well. So they're both exempted. The net result is that the income from exports and imports, the income from export, the tax on exports goes to the importing country. So that's the destination rule. The source rule says that the tax on exports go to the exporting country. And this is the argument that we have today with the OECD and the EU. They're saying the money that is kept in these tax havens, the profits were not generated in these countries that have these profits. So why are they, and the countries where the income came from are not getting taxes on them or sufficient taxes on them. So that's the argument. And this would solve that argument. Any country that exports pays their government taxes on their exports. Any country that imports already paid taxes through the exporting company. And when that importing country exports, they get taxes from what they export, and it all balances out. You'll have to read my paper to get more of it, so just take my word for it. It's better this way. See, I got a faithful convert right there. Only if the government could be converted like that. Yeah. The tax loophole issue. Most taxes, how am I doing for time? 2 minutes, okay. That's just about right. Most taxes in any system you look at, they have loopholes. And loopholes are generally things that are outside the normal rules. Like, okay, if you produce this product, no taxes on that. Okay, if you get this, you earn this amount of income, no taxes here. Or if you're in this field, no reduced taxes. Those are loopholes. And whenever you have something outside the rules, companies will exploit it. They'll make sure that even when they're producing a certain product, they make sure the product falls in that category that has the reduced taxes. Somehow they'll make it happen. But if you change the rules, the product goes back to where it was. They follow the rules, you see? And that's what's happening. That's what happens with tax loopholes everywhere, no matter what tax system you have. And one of them we have is exempting companies from our VAT, the normal VAT that we have. The question here is, should we continue exempting, oh, sorry, wrong one. Should we continue exempting companies or individuals from paying their fair share of VAT revenue? If you have a good system, will exemptions even be necessary? I don't think it will. I don't think you have to, even if the guy makes $10, you know those guys who sell peanuts on the road? I was arguing with my students the other day, said they wouldn't do it unless they were making about $20 a day, or at least, you know. I said, no, they can't be making that much. No, they're making a lot more than that. But if you made $20 a day and your VAT rate is 20%, you give the government $4 out of the 20. You don't need to be exempted, you know. It's like paying tithes. You make $10, you give God $1, 10%, you know. He doesn't say, if you only make $1, don't give me anything. Give him 10 cents. You see what I'm saying? Amen. Which chapter does Matthew? What? Anyway, my 2 minutes is running out. What's next? International alignment. Enterprise VAT will settle all this discussions with the EU and the OECD, I think. But these are issues, I don't have all the answers to these. That's why I call them questions and issues, and they're up for debate. My last slide, conclusions. It just simply says all that I've said before. It's a simple tax. It's a fair tax. It's easy to implement. The calculation is very easy. It's robust and efficient. My calculations show it'll be at least 80%, greater than 80% efficient, because the one we have now is 80% efficient, roughly. And I believe, my prediction is that it will transform the economy, not just the Grand Bahamian economy, but I believe the whole Bahamas. And I said somewhere in the main paper, this is oh yeah, I said here too. This is applicable to the rest of the world as well. So it's a new tax system which is superior to even personal income tax, and this is my prediction, and personal income tax and corporate income tax. So download the full paper from that website again. Well, I lost it. Can I put that last slide back up, please? I can start it from here. Okay, the first slide I'll do. On the bottom of the page is my website. If you have time, you could take it down and go there and get more information. Thank you.
This question is for Dr. Moxie. Presented a very comprehensive framework and outline for how we can transform to an innovation-based society. I think the only thing I didn't see in there was the patenting system. And can you speak to the importance of that and where we are as a country in terms of patents?
One of the things that we as the Bahamas, and we speak to this in another document that we presented to the government, technology-wise and innovation, you have to protect intellectual property. And one of the key things that the Bahamas must do is sign on to the PCT, or the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And what does that mean? Essentially, if you're an inventor in the Bahamas and you file a patent out of the Bahamas, what you have to do now in order to get protection globally is you have to file in every single country in the world individually. That's extremely expensive. And so one of the things that a lot of the countries have done, if you file in the US, for instance, you form an entity, file in the US, you can then file under what's called the PCT, or the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And so automatically now with that single filing, you have coverage worldwide. That is one of the things that the Bahamas needs to sign on. And that's a recommendation that actually the committee that I'm a part of made to the Attorney General's office that we do. Once you do that, those technologies that are developed here in the Bahamas can now be further protected by global patents at a very, very low cost for what it is we're doing. So that's an extremely good, good question to be asked, if you will, as well. And that's going to be required for innovation as well, to protect intellectual property in that way.
I hold out great hope for your enterprise VAT. But VAT, I think in general, you basically say is a better tax because, and generalizing, it increases the revenue. And I do accept that as well. But any increase in any tax to the revenue of a country is better for the government of that country, that no doubt is a consumer tax, and any increase in the revenue to the government must come from the consumer. So is it a good tax for the consumer?
Let me correct you on 2 points. It is a good tax, but not just because it increases tax revenue. The main reason it's a good, fair tax is because it taxes all income. For instance, personal income tax taxes the income of persons only. That's not all income. So a lot of income is still out there untaxed if you have only personal income tax. Corporate income tax taxes only corporate income. That's not all income. So you have a lot of other income out there that's not taxed. Value-added tax taxes all income. So that's why it's good. That's why it's the best tax, because it taxes all income. The second correction, and then I'll have to ask you to give me your question again. The second correction is, but not really a correction, and this is what you'll find in the full paper. It's often said that value-added tax is a consumption tax, and that's correct, partially. Why partially? Because if you and me, if suppose I'm selling bananas, and you buy bananas from me, you're the consumer, right? I'm the seller. So you pay taxes on that, and I get an income. But that's looking at it from that point of view. Now turn around and look at it from the other point of view. I sell you the tax, you give me some money, and out of that same money that got transferred from you to me, the government gets a certain fraction of it. So I paid income tax. It's the same thing, right? Suppose it was $1 worth of bananas. You give me $1 for the bananas, and I said 10% of that is tax, so 10 cents of that was tax. So it goes to the government. It came from you as the consumer, so it's a consumption tax. But it also came from me as an income earner, so it's also income tax. It depends on how you look at it, you see? So it's often said that it's a consumption tax, and that's partially correct. It's also an income tax. It's a tax on the income that's generated from the business transaction. So it's still on the screen. Jot down that thing and go on. I mean, for everybody, just go on. It's only a short 10-page paper. I make it sound like it's so long, but it's very short, and it'll explain all of this a little more. But what was your question? I just want to make those 2 corrections. But what was your question then?
I see the stretch of it being an income from
Okay.
the business person. Obviously, the business doesn't pay the tax because he just holds it for the government and he just passes it back to the
Right.
government. So
depending on how
really
you
no
look at
stretch on his.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect tax for business and government. But is that a advantageous tax to the consumer as opposed to the government?
Well, is it advantageous to the consumer? I'd say it's advantageous to everybody because I think it'll make a stronger economy. You see, enterprise VAT is different from it's basically essentially the same as invoice credit VAT, which we have now. Businesses take the invoices from their sales, and they subtract from that they subtract the tax on those invoices from sales. They extract from that the tax on invoices from their purchases. They call it output tax and input tax. So they subtract input tax from the output tax, and that gets remitted to the government. And that difference, output minus input, is income. That's all I'm saying. That's income. So it's the same thing, basically. So what the government gets is a portion of income. Enterprise VAT does it a different way, so we don't have to. It does the same calculation, but through the business accounts, like how corporate income tax would do it. And so everybody benefits, really, consumers as well as investors.
Being a businessman in Grand Bahama for some time, what would you say are the 3 things that are necessary to make businesses, especially for small businesses and medium-sized businesses, what changes need to be made to help those businesses be more profitable?
Lower fees not just in duty, but across the board. If you know, licensees of the GBPA pay the highest in license fees rather than government. And so if I get a government license to operate the same business, I'm paying a lower fee to government. And so lower fees will support and help and strengthen smaller businesses. And I think even as it relates to tax, fair level playing field for business owners. What we do for corporations and foreign investors is never given, or the opportunity is never presented to us who live here as small business owners. And so if we could get some of the same concessions or some of the same opportunities that foreign investors may have, we would be able to do well in the business. So those are sort of the two things that I believe if we could be able to have addressed, we'd be better off as SMEs.